freedom, passed from hand to yearning hand, and the vision of our fathers spread hope throughout this land, as the dream some fought and died for in my heart becomes my own. I will strive to keep her promise, America, my home. America, America, may God bless America, and freedom reign across America, my home. From the shorelines to the prairies, to the cities great and small, we have reaped the fruits of justice and liberty for all. So with deep appreciation for the blessings we have.
And responsibility for criminal defendants, and also doing other evaluations of individuals who, for lack of a better term, have abdicated their responsibilities as citizens and who have made themselves wards of the state.
Probation officers, the hospital, they all at some level, otherwise it's like you have to name them themselves. It's dangerous. Hospitals that have exploded in numbers of begin to develop more behavior disorders. But then gradually, when the insurance rules change, the hospitals change with them. They begin diagnosing these children, bipolar disorder, and other mood disorders, psychiatric illnesses, especially when the insurance companies no longer pay for a behavior disorder or for a conduct disorder, antisocial conduct. So they get all kind of diagnoses. So no wonder the parents keep looking for a reason for their child's behavior.
Well, they're hoping against hope, I think, sometimes too, that if there is some underlying illness that can be treated, that somehow by magic, either through a pill or from some appropriate therapy, that the behavior will change.
That my child will stop doing this.
Yes, yes.
But he doesn't. He gets out of the hospital, and the next week he's getting an assault charge for hitting his mother, or for striking a teacher.
Yeah. Well, unfortunately, this has happened for a lot of reasons. You mentioned insurance; that's part of it. But there are those rare cases. There are those rare cases where somebody's behavior is truly out of character. And by out of character, I mean that normally the person is a well-adjusted, responsible character. And perhaps they have a genuine bipolar illness. Bipolar illness is a real illness. It's nowhere near as prevalent as it is diagnosed most of the time, but it is a real illness. And some people, when they have this illness and they're in the manic phase of their illness, they will do some pretty nasty things, but it's not them, and it's not how they would behave if their biochemistry were right and if they were in basically their right mind.
Right, and when a forensic psychologist is doing an evaluation, that's basically the major task, is to find out if there is a real mental illness. Mm-hmm. And we're trying to separate out those juveniles, or in some cases adults, who are mentally ill. And the numbers that are committing antisocial acts are going to be predominantly the result of antisocial conduct, but that's what we want to do. We want to find out if a particular offender is mentally ill, mm-hmm. and then treatment is legitimate and mm-hmm. it's appropriate.
Mm-hmm. Well, this whole issue gets to be so much of a problem, primarily because we have this diagnostic scheme that the folks at the American Psychiatric Association decided to give us, that basically bases all these medical diagnoses on behaviors. In other words, if you do certain things, you qualify for one of these labels.
Yeah, and a lot of it's self-report.
Right.
Some of it's not even
right.
a behavior. It's what you say.
Yeah, it's whatever you say. And, of course, we know that people with character disturbances, they tend to not tell the truth a lot. So they'll report a whole bunch of stuff maybe that isn't even true. And unless you've got the goods, unless you've got some objective evidence, some good collateral information, you don't know whether they're telling you the straight stuff or not. But so you can qualify basically for one of these diagnoses very, very easily. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have an underlying medical condition?
There are really very few. As you say, the diagnostic manual is really a description of behavior. Some of it observable, some of it self-reported. It's not like real medicine. It's not like the diagnosis of an actual disease, which in mental health and in psychiatry is actually a very small number. The diagnostic manual is about 500 pages. There are hundreds of diagnoses, anywhere from gambling to the serious mental disorders. But the number of psychiatric conditions that are truly medical conditions are very small. We're talking at schizophrenia and manic depressive behavior, manic depressive disorder, which is now bipolar disorder. Manic depressive disorder, bipolar disorder used to mean something, it still does, in those people who are really ill. Most schizophrenics and most manic depressives don't even think they are ill, don't even think they have a mental disease. Mm. And it is closer than anything else in psychiatry to an actual brain disease, but not with the other behavioral disorders.
Mm-hmm. You know, this is maybe a little bit too nitpicky a topic to discuss on the program, but it's I think it's an important issue, so I'm going to bring it up. Bill Gates is famous for saying, with respect to data that you put into a computer system, garbage in, garbage out. In other words, the information you pull out of a database is only as good as what information you put in to that database. And one of the things that has horrified me as a clinician / researcher, as a psychologist, and you were trained the same way. We were trained to be both researchers and clinicians, both practitioners and researchers, and to know how to interpret research as a big part of our field, of our profession. And one of the problems I've always had is I've had a problem believing the data from many of the studies that we see. And the reason I have a hard time believing the data is because I know what kind of garbage is going into the system. And I'll explain what I mean by that. We give these diagnoses to people who don't deserve them. You mentioned the fact that as soon as the hospital stopped paying for behavior disorders like conduct disorder, which meant most of the adolescents, that's the appropriate diagnosis for them to get. Once these facilities stopped paying for that, then all of a sudden they started being diagnosed with such things as depressive disorders or bipolar disorder or impulse control disorders or whatever kind of diagnosis they could slap on them to get them in the door. The problem with this is that this makes a statistic, so that when someone does a study and they're looking at, say, well, what kinds of illnesses does, say, the prison population have, and how does that compare to the general population? Well, all of a sudden these diagnoses show up in great numbers. And then people will reach conclusions like, well, you know what? Most of the people in prison probably don't really belong there because you know what? Most of them really have mental illnesses. And yet we're shifting the population from where they should be because they have all these medical diagnoses. We're shifting that population to prison because we don't have room for them in the diagnosis. That's the conclusion. But that data is only as good as the information we put in, and if the diagnosis is not correct in the first place, we're putting in all this incorrect information.
Hello?
we're going to try this. We're going to try some audio here. We had a failure of audio, I guess, and I'm sorry for the interruption. But I think we should be back now with good audio. And as I mentioned before, we've been talking with Dr. Paul Diube. He's a forensic psychologist that's been in practice for years. And we were just going to talk a little bit, while we still have time in the program tonight, about, we were going to talk a little bit about his experience doing custody evaluations, those evaluations for the courts where he basically tries to make the best recommendation in the interest of the children's welfare for custody arrangements with marriages that have fallen apart, which is an all too frequent occurrence these days, and it's also a too frequent occurrence where, unfortunately, parents who have been at war with one another continue that warfare with their children right in the middle and conduct that warfare to the children's dismay, not in their benefit but to their detriment in these custody battles. So tell us a little bit about your experience there.
I think several things have impressed me over the years of doing custody cases, and just focusing on the beginning of a custody evaluation, I'm struck by the breakup of marriages, sometimes for such frivolous reasons. You could understand if one of the members, and sometimes one of the spouses, one of the partners do have maybe abuse or drug or alcohol, but you would also be surprised at the high percentage of these marriages that are coming apart, going into a custody battle, in which they have split up for no good reason to the detriment of the children. In other words, those marriages could have survived. And by the time they get to a custody case, the forensic psychologist can't do much about that.
Mm-hmm. Well, what kinds of frivolous reasons might somebody bail on the marriage other than, you could certainly understand abuse, severe drug abuse, serial infidelity, those kinds of things. You could understand that. But what are some of the more frivolous reasons that you've seen where folks will just bail on one another?
Well, they will end these marriages without any regard for the consequences to the children and to themselves and for everyone involved, not realizing what a stabilizing institution marriage is for them and for their kids. They're walking away from the institution of marriage that I think a lot of times they will regret later on, that certainly their children will suffer for. Sometimes these people are separating for a reason in which they just don't think that they can get along with their spouse, or too many arguments, or there may be, a lot of times there are financial issues, and also one partner choosing to be unfaithful. And so even that becomes a matter of character, that they have chosen to leave the marriage because of a relationship that they are pursuing and becoming unfaithful. And so yes, the marriage breaks up because of that. And I think what impresses me when I do custody, when I've done custody cases for so long, is that we want to. The common thought about it is that no one is to blame. People like to say that, that it takes two. The fact is, in most of these divorces, one person has decided to leave the marriage for one reason or another. One person leaves because the other partner is abusive or is having an affair or is in drugs. The other, or just doesn't want to be married anymore. And usually until there's just no other choice, one of the partners wants to stay in the marriage. It isn't that often that both people from the beginning want to get out.
Mm-hmm.
Usually, someone has done something, and so often in the divorces, the theme of your show comes down to character. That one person has had to leave the marriage because of the other partner is using drugs or being unfaithful, and then this becomes then an issue in the custody case in terms of who is going to get custody. That's important, and this is what the court really wants to know: is which of these parents is the more responsible person.
And as damaging as it is for the children in these problematic marriages, sometimes the ordeal of the custody battle itself is even more damaging to the children. Is that not correct?
It is. It is true, because they then continue the war with one another to the detriment of the kids. And in the most extreme cases, you have a parent who will alienate that child from the other parent, obstruct their visitation, give particularly if they're the custodial parent, even during the temporary period of time before they've had the final hearing, they can obstruct the visitation, make more and more allegations, poison the children against the parent.
Now, in some cases, that's understandable when there really is a significant character defect on the part of one of the parents. In other words, when they are, when they've been afforded opportunities, say to rehab for drug and alcohol abuse, and haven't taken the opportunity, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, if there is a bona fide reason which a non-custodial parent